Hi, my name's David Smith and I'm a cloud advocate at Microsoft. And if you've ever tried to teach a workshop using R, where the first half of the first day was spent answering questions like these, then this lightning talk is for you. Now, questions like this could be caused because people didn't read the setup instructions or installed old versions of packages or had the wrong operating system or a machine that simply wasn't powerful enough. But you can solve all these problems by running your workshop in GitHub Codespaces. And let's see how that works. So here I am in a GitHub repository that I've set up for my workshop. And in fact, this repo contains all the information that you need to recreate a similar experience for your workshops as well. And that's because it's set up to include something called a dev container. And what that allows me to do is to go to the code button in the repository, click Create Codespaces on main, and then GitHub will automatically create for me something like a little virtual machine, a Codespace container that contains all of the software that I need to support my repository. The right version of R, all the packages installed, RStudio server installed, even Python gets installed as well into this container to support some test checking that we have in these tutorials. So in just 10 or 20 seconds, GitHub will open up in its own web page in an interface that looks very similar to Visual Studio Code. And in fact, this is just Visual Studio Code running on the web. I can do all the usual things on that. I can browse into my file system, find all the files that come from my repository. This is from a workshop created by Microsoft that includes a Python notebook, which teaches people how to explore and analyze data using R. And I can interact with that notebook just as I would any other notebook. I can run this first cell. As you can see, it loads a number of packages. And that cell just runs without any errors at all because those packages have already been installed into the dev container. And similarly, I can use functions from the tidyverse to read some data from a file and then use the slice function to have a look at the data from that file. But what if you wanted to use RStudio instead of Visual Studio Code for your workshop? Well, because we've set up and configured RStudio Server in the dev container, that's super easy as well. All we need to do is open this little interface in Visual Studio Code and click a button on the RStudio port to launch it in the browser. This, of course, is RStudio Server, which is just like RStudio on the desktop. We can go there and open files from our repository, which live in the /workspaces folder, and browse again through the files in our repository. This time, let's open up an Rmarkdown document, test.rmd. And then we could use Rmarkdown just as we do on the desktop and have a look at the contents of it just by knitting it directly on the server. And because this has plenty of RAM and CPU, this all runs very, very quickly. So all of this works thanks to the magic of something called dev containers, which is basically just a specialized container designed for interactive use. You configure it using a folder called .dev container. You might have seen that in my repository, where you specify everything you need to be installed in that container to give the same experience for every user. Dev containers are 100% open source technology, and you can integrate dev containers into other applications using the command line interface. You can find lots of information about how to set up dev containers at containers.dev, but just to give you a quick preview, in this workshop, I loaded the R and RStudio from the tidyverse image from Rocker, which is a great project providing images for R-based containers. I specified the version simply be 4, which means it'll grab the latest 4.x version of R. And I've included other commands such as to install RStudio Server and to install various packages that we use in our workshop. There's another file called devcontainer.json, which you can use to configure the Visual Studio Code environment and also run commands within the container, such as starting the RStudio server. So in summary, if you want to create an easy workshop using GitHub Codespaces, just simply create a GitHub repo as you normally would, include all of the scripts, data, notebooks, and instructions that you need, and then set it up as a dev container, which provides the software environment to support the code for your workshop. And then all that the participants need to do is run your workshop within GitHub Codespaces. Now, currently that's only available within GitHub Enterprise or GitHub Education, but if your participants don't yet have access to Codespaces, they can also run it on their local laptops using dev containers in Visual Studio Code, and there's information on how to do that in that link right there. So thank you so much. You can find all the information about this talk at the link you can see on your screen right there. Bye now.